Thank you, everybody. It's good to see some familiar first names there. I can't see your last names. Um, I'm grateful for this opportunity. The title of this is Hurry Up and Wait, which is something I've talked about um, for a long time, all across Canada, with many of you. Um, but the title is Hurry Up and Wait, Approaches to Further Along One's HD Road. Um, I want to start out by talking about how I came to basically talk about the same thing all the time, which is accommodating the challenges of thinking or cognitive deficits, as the medical world would say, in your lives if you walk your own HD roads or if you love somebody with HD. How I kind of got into it and why it remains basically the only thing I talk about. So first of all, just a bit of history, I guess. Um, let's go back to 1967, 68 when Marjorie Guthrie, and then very quickly thereafter, she connected with Ralph and Ariel Walker, and they all set out to, quote, do something about HD. What that really meant was that they contacted physicians, and physicians told them find other families and then partner together with them and docs and scientists to do research to cure Huntington's disease. But I'm not a scientist or researcher. I'm part of the other thing, which is to care for or help families, individuals walking their own HD roads and people who love them, to help them along their roads. So you always had the like double thing of what we used to call, I haven't heard this lately, but cure, meaning science and research, and care, meaning families. So I'm a care guy. I come to it through nursing homes for, as Kelsey said, 38 years. And although my family and myself is not directly touched by HD, for example, I've been, as she said, been part of this for a long time and have come to know many of you. But I have no formal medical training. I have no medical training. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a nurse. I'm not a rehab therapist. I'm not a social worker. I'm a teacher who happened to end up working in a nursing home because when special ed basically is done in a nursing home, it becomes rehab. So I come to it as a layman in a lot of sense, meaning layman in the sense of non-medical. So I have different kind of experience, which is what I will share with you. Now, I know that on the thing it said I'm an expert, and I feel the love and respect, but I don't consider myself an expert. I'm not family, meaning my experience, or meaning when I say family, I don't mean somebody who has HD or loves somebody with HD, but I don't have 24/7, 365, every waking moment living with Huntington's disease experience. And I don't have more typical medical experience, meaning seeing people once a month or once a week or once a year in a clinic. And as a nursing home person, I don't come at it I'm from a nursing home with one person or two persons. We call them in the trade onesie nursing home with a onesie or twosie residents living with HD. I come to it from a nursing home that had at the same time about 60 patients, residents actually is the word, living with HD. Like after we admitted in 1986, when we first admitted our first patient living with HD, 2 years later, we had 45 residents living with HD. And then 3 years later, we had 61 residents living with HD. I worked in another nursing home where we had the same growth, where we had up to 40 residents living with HD. So I'm not 24/7. I'm 9 to 5 guy, Monday through Friday. But we had a lot of people with Huntington's, all kinds of people with Huntington's, whose experiences are all different. They're at different places along their HD road. We had young adults, we had older adults in their 60s and 70s. And they were reasonably far down their HD roads. Maybe they were halfway down their HD road, a third of the way down their HD road. And we had people whose main manifestation of HD was more irritable, the people kind of with short fuses, and people who were apathetic, who just wanted to be left alone and not do much by our standards. We had some who wanted to be in the nursing home and others who didn't want to be there. But none of them were unhappy. They had times that were tough. They had times that were crises. They had times that they wanted to kill the staff like me, all those kind of typical things. But most of their days, and I really have come to point this out, they were happy days. They got up every morning wanting to start their day, looking forward to what was ahead. As disabled as they were, as challenged as they were, their viewpoint or their perspective was just for the day, and I'm going to have fun and I'm going to be active. Is this, again, as disabled and as challenged as they were. So when I talk about learning all this stuff, I always want to highlight that, because given all the challenges and that people face, whether carer or person with Huntington's disease, sometimes we just make it look like it's always that, and that's not the case. That's why I always kind of look the other way when I hear about the notion of quality of life, because those folks who are well down their road would be kind of assessed by many people as not having a good quality of life. But since I was with them, I've learned that from their point of view at that moment in time, they were looking forward to their day. So in spite of it all, things were pretty good, meaning their lives. They enjoyed their lives. So we really had a lot of people all at once. We faced the same things that you face at home. We had people who wanted to take medications or didn't want to take medications, or were prescribed medications and refused to take medications. We had people who had problems eating, actually problems helping them eat. We had people who didn't want to eat. We had people who would eat so quickly and stuff their mouths. Not uncommon thing, I know, to many of you. They would eat too fast. We had people who hated puree diets. We had people who would have choking episodes. We had people who would sleep all day and people who would stay up all night. We had people who smoked unsafely, especially when we began. That's kind of gone out the window thing, as smoking is not tolerated in most healthcare settings. We had people who were angry and would have a short fuse and anger very quickly. We had people who rarely get angry and wanted to be, as I said before, left alone. We had people who were too hot all the time, or they were too cold all the time. The point is, we had a lot of folks with a lot of challenges all at the same time. That is basically my background. And by having so many people at once, even though we didn't have a 24/7, 365, we had to learn quickly because we had so many people. It was kind of like a lesson. And by a lesson, I mean, like, you learn long division in school, and then they give you a worksheet with 10 problems on it, and you got to do all that and practice. That's what we had. We had it was configured so that we had a lot of things. And I say we, it wasn't me personally. It was a small group of people within the nursing home. So we had a lot of challenges all at once. They were all different. And again, for all the problems, most residents enjoyed their days. As the census, as you say in the trade, the number of people live in a nursing home, in this case with Huntington's disease, increased. We were not alone. Here, being my hometown, and the first nursing home I worked at was in Greater Boston. We had the neurology department from Mass General Hospital help us come out once a month, consult. They used it as part of their training, but we had all the resources of Mass General Neurology. The second nursing home, I had a woman named Dr. Susan Folstein, who wrote a textbook that's now outdated, but on HD. So we had a lot of medical assistance. We also had, ironically, and I would be saying this even if I wasn't speaking to a Canadian group, I got a phone call one day from the co-founder of Honey Society Canada, Ralph Walker, who said, Jimmy, we must network you and your colleagues in your home, your team, with everybody else around the world. So we also could lean on other nursing homes to coaches. So our colleagues were coaches. In fact, I remember a couple of people from Canada, the late Estelle Klasner, who was a wonderful, wonderful speech therapist, who was just a leader in the field of speech therapy, never mind folks with HD. And there was a nurse named Winky Simpson at Runnymede Hospital. They all helped us. But even with the help of doctors and colleagues who were good coaches to us, I realized that even with all of that, still, so much about the day-to-day care fell to us in that nursing home, whether you're a nurse aide, a nurse, or any of the other professional group. And it's not unlike your families today. That is, as you do in Canada, you have access to world-class medical care. You have access to world-class neurology. You have access to HD specialist docs. I saw Mark Gutman, now retired, a couple of weeks ago at a meeting. But even with all that, it still falls to you to provide so much care. And that can be whether you're walking your HD road yourself or your family, your loved one, that can be a lonely experience, a lonesome experience. We really began, even with the help of colleagues and medical staff, we really began to, with all the challenges that we faced, we really began to listen to families. And professionals often say, my colleagues often say, excuse me, we learn so much from families. And that's true. But when they say that, believe them. And to make that real, I just want to give you a couple of quick early examples of what I mean by that, and that kind of prototypical of all my professional colleagues. Early on, one of the first 3 or 4 residents with HD that came to the first nursing home I worked in was a guy named Ed. And Ed would never leave his room. We knew he didn't want to be in the nursing home. So he would just lay in bed all day. We had all this stuff going on. He'd participate in none of it. He didn't want to take his meds, which he had been taking at home for years. And we were really frustrated. We wanted him to just participate in all the life of the home, the activities of the home, and there were plenty. So his wife would show up and say, oh, he's doing fine. This is great. I think he would have been better off a year ago with all the problems we had at home, blah, blah, blah. And we were so frustrated. Everybody expected that Ed would participate because that's what he was there for and go to these activities. By the way, they were already designed to accommodate a lot of the challenges of HD. But anyway, his wife says, listen, he's doing fine, but here's what I think we should do. We should bring his recliner, which was threadbare on the seat and from where he spent most of his days when he was at home, and his TV into the room, and just leave him alone. Respect that he doesn't want to participate in all this stuff. He will, but just give him time, one thing at a time, and whatever. We bring the chair in, and they were hours away. It wasn't easy to get a recliner there. And Ed spends the day, just as his wife had said, watching TV from his recliner. But one day, and we backed off. And one day, he gets up and lumbers down to the nurse's station and asks if he can have a cup of coffee. They got him a cup of coffee, and then the word spread around the nursing home. Ed left his room. Ed left his room. And it kept going, and Ed finally, it took a long time. This isn't one of those, oh, it was that simple stories. No way. But over time, when we backed off, Ed became a participant in so much other stuff going on with other residents, with the staff, all that stuff. We learned from his wife. One more example. We, on the other end of kind of things, meaning Ed represented, he didn't want to do much, but we had a young guy named John, funniest guy I ever met, maybe, but John wanted everything now, whether it was to open the window, if he was hot or cold, whether it was a Coke or a coffee or watching TV with 20 people. He wanted to watch his show now. And we were having great difficulty because from our nursing home culture, it's, don't you realize I can't just stop what I'm doing here? You have to understand that I've got 10 other people to take care of. Whatever. His brother came in and just said, listen, learn what I learned. Just let him do it. If he wants to go outside, let him go. If he wants something, get it for him now. Within reason. But if you can do it because he wants it now. That's not his personality. It's just my brother. And sure enough, we start to say, okay, well, I'll drop what I'm doing within reason and get it to him. And stop this. You've got to understand and all of this stuff. As his brother said, listen, if you tell him it's 5 minutes, it's not a figure of speech. In my brother's head, it's 5 minutes. I guarantee you there's a ticker in his head, man. In 5 minutes, he'll be yelling for you, what the hell's taking so long, and that kind of stuff. The point is, and his adaptive strategy, his brother was, listen, I've learned you can always do something early for somebody, but you can never, ever do it late. We fix that. We try to get the staff to stop trying to reason with people, as his brother had suggested. And all of a sudden, Ed took a long time out of his apathetic kind of manifestation. But when you did things timely, when John wanted them within reason, as best you could, John's problems interacting and engaging kind of went away. So I just offer those when we say we learn from families. We really do. And we're not, as professionals, many of us, and I'm one of them, I won't say this for all my colleagues, we're not predisposed to listen to families because we're an institution in a nursing home. They've got to take care of multiple people at the same time in such a congregate setting. But anyway, we learn from families. Now, some families have a tougher time. Some families have a lot of wisdom. Others have a tougher time. And I mean, that's why some families, but nowhere near all, look for a nursing home for their loved one. So they've had a time. They haven't gathered the kind of wisdom that John's brother or Ed's wife had. So But from the ones who did, we really began to gather a whole bunch of insights that changed the way we saw this. And then we actually met some people, and just so you'll believe me when I say this, I'm going to give you the names. 3-generation caregivers, people who took care of a spouse, then took care of an adult child, and then took care of a grandchild, all affected with HD. Those people, Lorena, Kathy, Wanda, and Ruth, were fonts of wisdom. So we would get it from them too. We would really listen to them closely. Now, we had our problems. I don't want you to think that we didn't still face challenges, have crises, fail at all kinds of things we thought were going to be the solution. We were slow learners as a group. It wasn't me alone. Again, as I said, a small group of people. But we were most importantly, looking back on it, how like hindsight is 2020, we were slow unlearners. Letting Ed just sit there in his chair, that was hard for us to do. Or dropping what we were doing within reason to hurry and give John what he wanted as soon as we could. That was hard to undo. Because they, and I'm stealing a line here from a guy named Brian Schrag, who walked in his own HD road, who's from the Cincinnati area now. Brian, if you've ever seen any of those T-shirts that say, excuse me, "I'm not drunk, officer. I have Huntington's disease," and the back goes into the details. That's Brian. But Brian, one of Brian's phrases is that he has to live in a non-HD world. I have HD in a non-HD world. So that's what we had to unlearn. We had to unlearn all the stuff of a non-HD world and try to understand better how people are thinking with the cognitive challenges of HD. So we really had to unlearn a lot of stuff, not learn it. I want to switch a bit here. So again, this is all context for how I came to talk about the same stuff. I want to talk about what they refer to as the clinical triad. Clinical triad are the different groups of symptoms of HD. So there's the movement related ones, physical related ones. There's the mood ones, depression, more the mental health issues, and there are the cognitive challenges. We learned in dealing with a lot of people that those cognitive challenges are the most prevalent in all interactions between people. That they, meaning you all who walk with HD, your challenges make you think a little bit differently. This does not mean anything like Alzheimer's. I'm one of these people that goes nuts when we say Huntington's disease is like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, all the same time. I don't think that advances us because you don't lose your memory with HD. So when I say cognitive deficits, it's not related to memory. There are some issues, but they're not high on the list of priorities of what you're going to live with. But anyway, the cognitive things were the most challenging, clearly for us, excuse me, as nursing home carers. So we basically had to do that thing of try to make our nursing home an HD world. So if you had HD, you weren't living in a non-HD world, you live in an HD world. So we began to figure that out from the lessons from families. And now, because consistency is so important, and because one bad apple can in fact spoil the bushel, we had to teach it to the entire staff. So we had to try to get inside the heads of people who are right in front of us. Most of their days are happy, but the problems are that we don't understand what the challenges of thinking feel like. So to teach them, to teach that to the staff, and by the way, so if somebody has learned not to try to reason with John, John, I'll get you the Coke when I get through this. I got 10 others. Excuse me. If everybody learns that and one staff has a short fuse themselves, the staff, or is just, used to nursing home culture of, well, you just got to wait, John. That will trigger John and he'll have a lousy day. He'll get angry. So will his roommate, and so will the staff, and so will the other residents. So when I say one consistent report, because one bad apple in a care home can ruin a lot of days for a lot of people. So we have to figure out how to teach this stuff to people. So we came up with a bunch of exercises to teach this. And I want to show you what they are, but I'm going to make a change here from what I anticipated because I can't see you all on the screen. And to do it, I really need to see that. But looking at the names on the screen as the first names, I'm guessing a lot of you have done this with me somewhere in some province somewhere or at some national meeting. The first thing we exercise is to try to understand what it is like to think slower or to do anything slower that you've done fluently. So everything you do in life, you pretty much do fluently. That's what makes it functional. But what if you do something that you once did less fluently or slower? And we do this writing exercise, I call it the slow writing exercise. And again, it's very difficult for me to try and make this point, but I'm going to try because all I can see is myself here. But if I asked you to write your name, so here's mine, over and over again, pretty much the frequency of the letters you wrote per minute, not how many times you wrote your name. You'd write your name, if we counted up everybody's frequency of letters written, it'd be like 180 to 90 or something like that. Some people are faster than others, not better than others, just different characteristic pace. So you write your name at cursive at 180, 90 a minute. And then we take it and I ask you to write your name. And I know some of you have done this with me. We ask you to go way down from that fluent range, way down, as we say here in Boston, wicked far down, to 6 letters a minute. To write your name at 6 letters a minute. That's 1 letter every 10 seconds. And it looks like this, starting out with the J in my name. So I would start now, and 5 seconds in, be halfway through, and 5 more, be finishing up. 5 more, halfway through the second letter, 5 more finishing. Really slow like that. And then we do that for about 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes sometimes. And then I ask, what did that feel like? And people, first of all, I'll say, do you want to keep doing that after 2 minutes of doing that? No. Why? What did it feel like? And people will say, as predictable as the sun's coming up tomorrow, it's exhausting. All those words, exhausting, tiring, fatiguing. It's distracting. I almost forgot how I spell my name. I kept pausing. I don't know. It was like my mind was elsewhere. All of those things because you're doing it slower. We understand when we do the exercise what it's like to think slower. You are more prone to those distractions. you get stuck. It's like, wait a minute, where am I writing my name? But most important, physically, it feels lousy. It takes more concentration, and nobody likes doing anything with concentration unless they really have to. It's not a pleasant thing. So that was one exercise. And again, I'd rather do that in person with you, but I can't do it if I can't see you on the screen. But to make the point of what it feels like to think slow. And when I use the word feel, I do not mean I feel like I've lost skills. I feel like depressed. I can't. All those psychological, those are all very real. But just the physical feeling of doing anything slow, it's not pleasant. Then I'm going to tell you a story. We had to tell people to stop interrupting people when they speak. So because people do things slower, in a conversation, there's kind of a between people, there's like a back and forth. But if one person thinks, again, knows everything, but thinks slower, not necessarily slow, but slower, there's never that natural back and forth. It's always like, how you doing? Pretty good. What are you doing now? Going home. Never back and forth. If you're with somebody with that delay, that processing delay from slower thinking, sometimes you ask them a question and say, how you doing, Frank? You expect an immediate, oh, I'm good, but it might take 1 second or 3 or 4 for them to say, oh, I'm good. That delay, that processing delay, people don't wait for it. The story I tell, and I'm going to be brief here, and I know some of you heard this before, is I was once in a nursing home with a guy named Tony, and I was having a wonderful chat with him about his family. The discussion driven by Tony, because he was just asking me how many kids you got, and I'm asking him about his. The stuff we do as people. And every time, so it was like, how many kids do you have? How many boys, how many girls, that kind of stuff. Are you married? Are you divorced? Da, da, da. Every time I would ask him a question, I would start to talk exactly at the same time. So I'd say, so Tony, how many kids you got? And he would say 3. Or I would say, Tony, so how long have you been retired? 2 years. Every time, though, I would ask him one of these kind of easy, routine questions, he and I would start to speak at exactly the same moment. Stepping on your words, I guess is the expression. So I asked him, and I could tell I was irritating him while this was going. I kept said, Tony, I keep stepping on your words. I'm sorry. But I kept doing it because some of us have a hard time with this. And I'm one of them. So I happened to say, Tony, what's your daughter's name? And if I could zip it, it would have been like this. Tony, what's your daughter's name? Andrea. But he had me with him. So what he got was, Tony, what's your daughter's name? How many kids you got? How many girls? Do I know her? And all Tony wants to do is get to Andrea, and people find that really irritating and annoying and frustrating. But we come wired, like me, a lot of us who have difficulty with trying to fill words in pauses. I see it my own self at 73. I pause often as I am speaking to you when my adult kids are just running with another part of taking the conversation in another direction. So the Tony story was, don't set the ticker back. Wait. First story, slow writing, what it feels like to think slower, even though you were fluent once and still have your funded information. The second one is the Tony story is people are slower, have processing, trying not to set the ticker back. And the third one, exercise, and there's several of these, but I want to do one for brevity's sake, is that it's difficult to do more than one thing at a time. So I am now going to try to share my screen, but we don't know if we can do this. Stick with me, folks. I can't even see my own screen, so I'm going to forget this and keep going. Stop sharing.
Jimmy, do you want me to share it for you?
No, because at this point it would slow me down.
Okay.
Anyway, but thank you, Kelsey. So, but it's the activity of doing more than one thing at a time is very simple, and that is like we ask people to write down this number, 43,682. 43,682. Now we ask you to divide that by 139. And nobody says, oh, great, another long division problem. Because we all did long division at one time reasonably fluently back in grade school, but now we have calculators and all this stuff. But if you were forced to do it, you could do it longhand with a pencil instead of your cell phone or your calculator. So it's something that you see that you've lost fluency on that too, but it's multiple steps at the same time. It's estimating whether the gazintas, how often does this go into that? Then you have to do a little multiplying and then a little subtraction fact and then recycle through. That's what we mean by doing multiple things. It's akin to multitasking and having to do several things at once in sequence over and over. Or another one you'll see when you're at the doc's office or participating research, where they will say, count backwards from 100 by sevens, called serial sevens. And the reason they do that is because you say 100, and then you do a little subtraction problem, going in a new direction, -7, 93. Then you do this little thing, maybe different people do it different ways, of, 3, okay, 3 and 4 is 7, so I'll take those 3, go 4 deep into the 80s, the 86, go back to 86, come back out, 86, like that. So managing multiple things. That's we had to convince the staff that simple things can be as annoying as you doing that long division without a calculator. It feels lousy. And the last thing that we had to teach them is the most difficult, which is when somebody wants something, they want it now. And if I ask people that question, as if you've heard me speak before, I probably did, I would say, okay, fill in the blank. When somebody living with honey disease wants something, they want it. And people all over the world will say now. And then I usually wait about 5 seconds. And if it's a reasonable size group, somebody will say, how about yesterday, kind of thing. And I will then say, sometimes it seems like people with honey disease just can't wait. It's not a neuro thing. I'm sorry, it's not a personality thing. It's not a characteristic trait. They're impatient. It's a neurologic issue. It's a neuro thing, man. So that's what we had to teach people. So along the way, I came to realize that there were some problems that some strategies that kept popping up over and over again as we would try to fix some of these problems. And they were slow down and don't set the ticker back. And like John, just give him what he wants within reason. And don't ask them complex things. It's difficult to do multiple step things. So ask people to participate one at a time. And as best we could do that, we were creating to use Brian's thing, living with HD in a non-HD world, as much as we could, creating an easily accommodating environment, nursing home, for people who have these challenges thinking. And they're challenges because they live with them and they overcome them every day, every moment. But they certainly don't make it an easy road. None of these things that so the four that keep coming up over and over again were those four. One thing at a time, slower, go slower, don't set the ticker back, and hurry up if you can. So those, to me, became the universal accommodations for challenges with thinking with challenges caused by Huntington's disease. For us who don't have HD, to accommodate those challenges your loved ones face, or me in the nursing home, that if we can do that, we might be able to just take a little bit of the potholes along the road, straighten a curve here or there, just a little bit. But even to change the experience a little bit of living with HD is helpful, or your experience as a carer. So none of these things work immediately. If you slow down, it's not going to make it easier today, but it will tomorrow. And as time goes on, they will work because people think slower. They have fewer neurons firing efficiently, and it takes longer and more effort to process stuff. So that the more we can slow things down, it is going to be helpful. It's not a test, doesn't need to be validated. It's just common sense. And you see that. None of these things work instantly over time. The other thing is, some people, like the people in nursing home staff, object to this because they say, Jimmy, or whatever colleagues that tell them to slow down, they will say things like, I don't know, man. He told me, screw you, pretty articulately, pretty quickly. I don't know what the slow thing is. So they tend to say, nah. Just because people can tell you to stick it where the sun don't shine really quickly, that's a whole other brain system. It's far more reflexive. That these things coexist. The fluency and articulateness of take a hike, but they do coexist. Whoever wired our brain did a pretty good job, wouldn't you say? That all these things are going on at the same time. Again, some of the accommodations are more useful than others. I'm going to skip that here for time. So hold on one second. I'm trying to make some changes here as we go. So anyway, that's how I came to talk about this all the time. And as I needed a topic to talk about at meetings, I needed one that would have relevance for everybody, whether they're early in their HD road, whether they're late in their HD road, whether the person living with HD or one who loves them. I needed to be relevant for any point along the road, and I needed to be relevant for whatever role you play. As I said, whether you have HD, whether you're a carer or a friend, if you're a staff member somewhere. And it had to be a topic that hopefully would be helpful in some way. And it's something that you will recognize either in yourself or your loved one. And I think you will on the slowness and the trying to wait and give people more time. So those 4 things: go slower, one at a time, wait, don't set ticker back, and hurry up if you can. They became like what I consider the universal accommodations. If you can do those 4, you're going to be in good shape. But they don't necessarily cover everything. But I do see them as the universal accommodations for this stuff. Now, but I've come to call it and passed on hurry up and wait. And the reason for that is because the 2 most difficult things to do, I found, and I know from talking to thousands of other people, one of the most difficult is, so the 2 most difficult ones are not setting the ticker back and waiting for people to respond. There's the wait in the hurry up and wait. And hurrying up is the other one. So because people can't wait, I'm asking you to hurry up. Again, not personality, neural thing. I want you to hurry up. But they think slower. So I want you to wait. I want you, and you say, wait a minute, hold it. You want me to wait because they're processing slower, have some delays. You want me to wait. And at the same time, because they can't wait, you want me to hurry up. You want me to hurry up and wait both at the same time? That is absurd. And yes, it is absurd. It makes you want to scream to do them both at the same time, whether you're living with it, and especially if you're a caregiver in this case, hurry up and wait to do them day in and day out over time is extremely frustrating. As you might have heard me say in the past, it's like a profound act of love to have to do that. It's really, really difficult. So the big 4 really are hurry up and wait. That's how I came to learn that. Now, it's not that simple, and people can be overwhelmed. And so this is the Irish exit thing. So just let me set this up for what I wanted to say. Some things we still have to figure out as you, if Huntington's disease is new to your family, that aren't covered by anything you really see and all the brochures and stuff of the medical world, and what you are seeing in front of you. A lot doesn't get covered. And the example I've come to use lately is this notion of an Irish exit. For those of you who know what it is. For those of you who don't, the person you love living with HD may be sitting right in front of you, apparently carefree, attentive, and engaged with you. But because you can't see beyond their face how they think or what they're processing information-wise, they may take an Irish exit advance. What is an Irish exit advance? It refers to, for those you don't know, refers to a person leaving a setting, a situation, a conversation without letting you know. Their disappearance unnoticed, you may ask, where did he go? And you may feel puzzled, confounded, infuriated, or angry. Or as somebody I met last weekend, a husband, hurt, and he thinks it's rude. One more advance. So what's this got to do with HD? Advance. Families and professionals suspect that. For those living with the challenges of neurologic disease, not just HD, and there's a lot of Irish exits in life, it's an adaptive way, whether they're aware of it or unaware of it, to relieve, avoid, escape, or avoid the stress of cognitive overload or overstimulation. Here's a limerick that might be helpful to make this point of what it is. While somebody's sitting there, the party's rocking for sure, and all I see is the door. They might wonder why the Irish goodbye, but the confusion is too much to endure. The point is that it's the perception of the person who's in front of you. What you see unaffected as not overwhelming, it could be noise, it could be kids running around, it could be the questions you're asking them, it could be another thing. It creates kind of an overstimulation or overload. Advance it if you would. One more limerick. A woman sat sharing a beer. Suddenly she disappeared. Couldn't you tell I'm overwhelmed? Of course, I still love you, my dear. Advance. So it's important that we know that we don't face the same challenges that people who are walking their roads face cognitively. The challenges create different ways of thinking and perceiving things. So we perceive and sense things differently. Affected people report that it's often this just leaving the situation is related to noise, lighting, crowded spaces, too many people, too many questions asked. Maybe the discussion's getting too serious. Maybe they're tired, or just simply there's too much going on. And all we need to do is to understand, click, that this may be just an adaptive way, not rude, no, an adaptive way to prevent further problems, like John screaming when he wants the window open or he wants a Coke. Further prevent problems that may be caused by their becoming overloaded or overstimulated, meaning overstimulated in processing all the stuff that's coming through. That you, because you are thinking fluently, you're just processing it, man. We are doing fine. But when you start to lose fluency in some of these things, it gets more difficult, and we can't see it. So we can help by realizing that this is driven by their challenges of thinking, and that if you consider all this, it may be the most gracious thing that they can do in that moment. And two more quick helpful limericks. I can't understand it either. Sometimes I just need a breather. I know you can't tell that I'm overwhelmed. My brain just needs a moment of leisure. And I think there's one more. There's something you were trying to say. I stood up and just walked away. For leaving mid-sentence, I'm not seeking repentance. At that moment, I just couldn't stay. Again, for processing stuff. My point is, they are only overwhelmed in their perception, and it's really difficult for us. There's so much going on. It's so fast. It's certainly not slow. It's difficult in engaging people because nobody in the setting is there's too much going on for anybody to not set the ticker back. And there's just so much going on that there's no room in their head for one thing at a time. So they get overwhelmed. But it brings us back to the four things. So anyway, that's the Irish exit. And you can unshare me now. Which I just point out that there's so much more to see than what there's more to this stuff that's mainly cognitive, that's mainly challenges in thinking in people's behavior, not their misbehavior and all the challenging ones, but just in the interactions, engagement, the daily life. Those cognitive challenges are omnipresent. And it's still hard. I know I'm still learning and trying to understand that, to see what's going on, because it will make us better carers. So I'm going to stop there, and I had other stuff, but it's really difficult to do it without being able to flip through my PowerPoints. So I would invite comments. Do you see this stuff? Uh, Questions, suggestions.
I have one comment here from Joe. Joe says, Jimmy, if our loved one hears a loud motorcycle or revved up car, he can find this noise incredibly distressing and upsetting to the point where he doesn't want to leave the house in case there's a motorcycle around. He wasn't like that before HD. That same noise doesn't bother him if he hears the same sound in a movie. Do you know why that would be?
Probably I don't know any more than I bet you already considered, Joe. And I do know, though, in a very broad sense, that behavior, again, not broadly speaking, is specific to people, places, and settings. So there's probably more difference, but that is being perceived than you or I would see that would prompt us to ask the question, why at home versus why in the movie theater? But I can't give you a beyond what you've probably already thought of.
Do you have any, I guess, strategies that can be used to manage that?
No, I can't. That's over my. I can't figure that out.
That's okay. We had a couple of comments as well that just said, great examples, Jimmy, very helpful, outstanding guest. Another question we have is, do you have any tips or tricks for waiting in a conversation to try to give the person the space to talk?
Um, I just got to get this straight. You mean so you're the person who's not affected
Mm-hmm.
for waiting, right?
Yeah.
For them. Okay. Oh man, I should have said, Kelsey, we can't allow any difficult questions. It's so all I can do. I'll give you a couple of I don't know if they're really tips, but they're what I do.
Mm-hmm.
I struggle with this all the time. It's, as I told you, hurry up and wait. It is so difficult to do. Some of us more than others. I always joke about psychologists and counselors. They're all chin tuggers. They're trained to listen. So I tug their chin and nod their head or whatever. We don't have that training. So we struggle with it. It's wicked hard to do. I still do it all the time. Some of the things that I've done, that I do, this is, I don't admit this often, but like one thing is, I'll put my hands in my pockets and I'll count off like in my head while I'm forcing myself to stay focused and wait for the answer. Mississippi 1, Mississippi 2, Mississippi, just something to draw me away and let it go. Let the ticker go. There's an acronym I always think of, which is for wait. And I don't know, one of you all, for all I know, I don't know where I picked this up, might have told me this acronym, but the acronym is WAIT, WAIT. Why am I talking? All right. So somewhere along the line, that somebody mentioned that to me. It's in my head all the time now. I'll think of that acronym. It's really hard to do, and people struggle with it. I used to talk about this, and if you see me speak, I'll spend most of the time as we talk about this at how simple these notions are. Like anybody can understand wait. Anybody can understand don't set the ticker back. The notion is so easy. The problem is in the world we live in, if anybody else tells you to, if they come into your home or your workplace and just says, hey man, y'all gotta chill, y'all gotta slow down. almost universally, people are going to roll their eyes and say, yeah, right. We live in these cultures, and it's getting worse. We live in as I always like to say, many of us are old enough to remember before the word multitasking was invented. And so the culture needed a word evidently for this. But it's just incredibly difficult to do. And I don't have any universal fix. I know how hard it is. You'll hear people say all the time, oh, yeah, I know I got to do this. I try it. I did it for a while, and then I'm back into the old thing.
Mhm.
So I always just say, do as I do, not as I say. I'm still trying. Just hang in there, keep at it, because it will make a difference.
Mhm.
So again, here I am, not helpful, but if misery loves company, I'm here for you. That's really hard. I do not
Mhm.
underestimate how difficult it is.
I find too that it's nice to do in all of my conversations, even with people who don't have HD, as like a reminder and to give people the space. And I found that the more I do it, the more people feel willing to talk and share more ideas when you just give them that extra space to get it out there.
I try the same, but again, it's kind of the other thing. Yeah,
Yeah.
the whole thing. I mean, the bigger point from you I get is all of the stuff, except hurry up, but slow down, one thing at a time. Those are universal, things that are going to help anybody with any neurologic problem, including aging.
Mm.
Speaking for myself, um, some of them are like I always like to joke around and say, you wonder why mindfulness had to become a thing. These are kind of like principles of being mindful. I
Mhm.
know they are in my case, as I do exactly what you're saying, Kelsey. I try to apply this kind of stuff, but the waiting stuff, it's hard. It's really hard.
Another question we have, do you have any tricks for when someone with HD gets stuck on one topic or thought over and over again?
See, yeah. See, you let one difficult question in, and you get more of them. No, so let me give you the straight answer. No.
Mhm.
However, um, so this is I didn't say it today, but I often say, so here are four big ones, but there are other ones. But for brevity, I'm not going to cover them. This thing of saying the same thing over and over again, medical world still calls it perseveration. Uh, uh, my not covering this is intentional because I don't know what to do, say, or whatever. One of the things that I did to make it more understandable and real from what you see is in my own vocabulary, even though the technical medical term might neuropsych, whatever, might be perseveration, I've changed it to repetitive insistence because it tends always to be, not always, but often to be looking for something or want something, da 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 da. No, I don't. The mental health world always will tell you, and actually the AA world, I think, will say, uh, always be aware of if you're hungry, lonely, angry, or tired. And uh, um, you can use that. I use that, even though those worlds use the term differently. But if you're trying to distract somebody from this repetitive insistence, I always think of hungry. Can I get you a drink? Would you like something to eat? Instead of just trying to change the topic. Or I think angry, I'd be if they're angry, I'd agree with them. That old trick of like just agree and they'll get off task and say a related idea in their anger. Uh, the other one people always talk about is when you try to distract somebody and you can't think of the basic needs: food, clothing, and shelter. Meaning, uh, so shelter, I think, my version, I'm just making this up, man. Is it hot? Can we open a window? You know, you want to go outside? It's too cold. Let's go. What do you put? A coat, a sweater, whatever. So I do have those drills in my head, but not enough for me to say, try this out, man. Just it's hard. And the reason it's hard, and this, it's not. So my point of bringing this up right now is, it's not you. It's annoying for everybody. There's a part of the brain that HD affects that does, like, we don't do the same thing over and over again because this functioning part of our brain kind of monitors that and says, unconscious to us, doing work for us. Oh, you already said that. Don't say it again, in a sense. That part gets affected over and over. It's not just consequent, it's over and over. The point is, it's a neuro thing, and if you can only try your best. So again, not a lot of help.
All right, we have one more here. Do you have any thoughts as to if nature or familiar hobbies like sports team or colors might provide comfort in some way?
I do. I do. I don't know if it's related. So since I can't go back and forth, and I can't even see. Just let me say a little bit about sports teams,
Yeah.
about sports in general. So first of all, if you're a fan, hold on one second here. I was looking for some familiar names on my screen to use an example, but I can't. So there's Headley. Headley has been a fan of the Boston Bruins in BC, Victoria, forever. So when anybody is a fan of a team, it's usually a long time thing. So you come in preloaded with lots of baggage, lots of passion, and the fact that, except football, but hockey and basketball and baseball, they have multiple games, right? They have 80 games or 160 games, and it's something you can track day in and day out. So you can start the day saying, hey, how did the Red Sox in our case do last night? Or, oh, they're not playing today. They're traveling too. They're playing Wednesday. All of this kind of stuff of following it, it gives you fodder to talk about those sports almost daily. And yes, I have, in fact, here a Bruin schedule, which just has a little thing, and I can put my W, a loss. But simple things like this, which I got from working in those nursing homes, where we would have people track over time all the stuff. And I've never given it up. I still do it for myself. But the sports teams, or ongoing sports teams, especially those, not the 16 weeks of football or whatever it is, give you an opportunity, yes, to draw that out and keep people engaged almost on a daily basis when they're in season. If you can give people access to the standings, all that stuff, yes. Yes. So nurture that, use that. I don't know about the colors. And I'm not boring you, but I go into great detail in the sports thing.
Well, I think that is our last question for today. Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about before we sign off, Jimmy?
No, so I'll tell them we had a lot of technical difficulties before we all, Kendall and Kelsey and I, whatever. So we bailed my PowerPoints. So it's been a little bit different experience. I hope it's still been helpful and I got the main points. But in closing, the final thing I really want to mention is that this stuff is kind of like the waiting. It's really hard to do. The simple notions, slowing down, one thing at a time, waiting. It's really hard to do. But if you're walking your HD road I will speak for you, as arrogant as that is, and say it's helpful. It can, above all, do no harm. It can't hurt. Also, that all this stuff is so hard to do, you're not going to have an aha moment and have massive behavior change where you can do all this stuff overnight. It involves chipping away. When you fail at setting the ticker back, don't keep trying. It matters. The bottom line is, in your home, as close as you can get to creating situations that accommodate those challenges in thinking, the better off it's going to be for you as somebody who loves somebody with HD as it is for that person. But it is not easy because we live in these cultures that are really high paced, multitasking, and all this stuff. It's not easy, but it does make a difference. And I always like to close by saying these days, I'd like to talk about hope. I like to talk about HD, which is self-evident, humanity and hope. So by humanity, I mean all the stuff that I've covered. Above it all, we're only human. Being asked repetitively the same thing over time with no ill intent of the person who's doing it will drive you nuts. That's humanity. If you're Tony setting the ticker back and I'm the guy who can't wait, him being frustrated, that's his humanity. And, have you ever just said, man, I'm only human, that kind of thing? Because HD, even though I have said a couple of times, you can still be happy and have humorous moments. It's really, I'm only human moments too. And hope. And hope is that we can get better at accommodating these needs as non-carers, that we can get better if you have HD yourself at explaining this stuff for us. People tell their stories, but they don't tell a lot about what these challenges inside their head really feel like. And I know it's a lot to ask, but if you could, it would make us better understand so that we could accommodate more. So even that's not hard. And so that's my hope. So I always say Huntington's, humanity, and hope. And that's why we have the universal heart hands symbol, which is this. And we extend your index fingers like an H, and it stands for Huntington's, hope, and humanity. So I know it's not easy, and walking your road, obviously. I also know, carers, it's not easy walking your road either. I've been close enough to it. Had the gift to be close enough to it long enough, not to experience what you do, but to understand how difficult it is. So that's all I got to say.